At Parliament, we have Michelle Ngele Odhiambo as well as Ibrahim Karanja. We also have Nina Shaban, who's roving around Nairobi between Parliament and going to Treasury, but primarily stationed at the National Treasury, where the CS is meant to be, emerging from later on in the ceremonial way, where we have him coming out with the different relevant persons in regards to the budgeting process from the executive side of things. And we also have our team at the Jivanji Gardens here in Nairobi, and that is Frida Mwaka, who's going to be having a conversation now to our ground, Bunge la Wananchi. So before we go to Bunge la Kitaifa, we shall be going to Bunge la Wananchi as well. So getting a sense of what you think and what you feel is the sense of the state of the nation, the state of the economy, and where the pain points are. And just to help you understand, I still see people wondering whether there's a difference between the budget, the finance bill, etc. And we shall be getting to a number of those things in the course of our production. So without much ado, I think we'll just begin with our guest in studio, who is a council member of East Park. And it's really good to have you here, Bwana Hezbon Omolo. And thank you for joining us on NTV. Just to kick it off, before we even cross over to Parliament or otherwise, what for you are some of the big things to look out for when it comes to today's budget?
Thank you, Dan. We look forward to quite a number of things. However, unlike before, the budget-making cycle nowadays is so predictable. So most of the things we expect the finance minister to come out with are already known.
Yes.
From the budget policy statement that was issued way back, we already knew the ceilings as they were. We knew we couldn't go beyond 4.3 trillion. And of course, what we look forward to is what is it that we are going to do in terms of addressing the healthcare challenges, how much money has been provided for addressing the social health authority. Again, we need to look at the key drivers of our economy. Agriculture is very key. How much is in that space? How do we intend to tackle unemployment through this budget?
Yes.
Those are things we'll be looking at. And of course, our public debt has been a big issue. What is it that is coming out to address the public debt? And of course, the pointers are, what is the deficit level? That will tell you how much the government is probably still expecting to borrow, so that we know whether the economy is in the right track or not. So basically, those are the things we're looking at. But then this government rode on the better agenda. So how far are they allocating resources on the key priority areas that this government campaigned on?
Yeah, because, I mean, there has been a lot of hue and cry regarding some of these critical sectors, like you mentioned, healthcare, education, and right now we're seeing concerns around security. And there are a number of things that are there, and, just social protection, where we are finding many more vulnerable people in need of that. So I think the clarity that, many would want is, yes, the process is different. I mean, rather, it's different from what we had before in the past, today is not usually as big, for those who know the process, as it used to be long ago, where everything was a surprise, But just for the benefit of those who may not understand, there are things that the CS can introduce today, or rather just bring up today, that are not yet in the public domain.
I think in the process of cobbling up the budget, there's been feedback, there's been hearing from the various sectors, and therefore the key concerns will be the revenue-raising measures, because the estimates are already there. Parliament has already gone through some of those through the various departmental committees. But then how are you going to raise the money? That means we need to look at the tax measures. If there are any new tax measures that are coming on board, what are they? And then two, if you're looking at administrative measures to improve revenue collection, that could mean changing certain tax laws, including the Tax Procedures Act. So those are the things we'll be looking at in terms of exactly what is it that is going to be done differently. I know there's also been the challenge of data protection and the fear around privacy.
Yes, exactly.
The government has been very keen on trying to increase revenue collection and seeking to give Kenya Revenue Authority more latitude to be able to check bank details for taxpayers. And of course, that is something that we'll be looking at. Is it something we are still driving? So those are some of the issues we'll be looking at in terms of the revenue-raising measures. But again, on the expenditure front, There could be some element of rationalization. The issue around school feeding program has been such a heavy one,
yes,
and a matter of concern. So if the CS has listened to the cries of the people, then there could be some balancing here and there. I know education still consumes the highest budget, but then now that there are certain challenges around social protection and especially the vulnerable in our community,
yes,
what is it that the government can do to ensure that we do not expose the young learners from lack of access to school? You can go to school, but if you're hungry, there's no way a child will learn. And therefore, the vulnerable in our communities, how do we protect them? But again, it also raises something. Is that level of school feeding program supposed to be a devolved function, or is it a national government function? If it is, then why would it still be there? So there are also issues around how much ready are we to devolve certain resources to follow certain functions that are already devolved.
Right. I'd like to welcome onto the set Javas Bigambo, who is governance analyst and not anyone new to our screens.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much.
So we're just trying to, I mean, for the context here is that we do know that the process of budgeting changed. You know, it's not how it used to be where on budget day, everything is a surprise, so to speak. And you know, there are things which we are looking to see what the CS will do, how we are going to raise the revenue, etc. What for you do you feel are some of the key things to look out for from where you stand?
Well, before I go into the particular things that I think I'll be curious to see how revenue is raised for purposes of financing that are budgeted for, I would say that we as citizens need to appreciate that a budget is a very critical document in terms of national development that emanates from planning, and the intention is to execute. And this budget is always enabled by way of revenue-raising measures which are contained in the finance bill. And that a budget and its utility, it is what enables all aspirations or goals that are political, social, economic, and even administrative. When you look at President William Ruto when he was campaigning and coming into power with the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, to finance whatever he aspired, the annual budgets have to be prepared. And for those budgets and their attendant estimates to be made real, then revenues have to be raised. The other thing is that not every issue that is budgeted for will be fully implemented. And I think I walked in when my relative here was talking about the intricacies of the budget and the budget processes. As a matter of fact, that's why there are estimates. That even the projected revenues may not be raised. And that will lead to a challenge in terms of the implementation. In fact, we need to look at it in terms of even the individual budget that people come up with in their domestic spaces. That some things could be budgeted for, but within that month or that year may not be realized because of revenue challenges. And so as we look at the day that is significant today, Honorable Mbadi reading out or presenting to the people through the Parliament, I am keen to see, for instance, how realistic and practical are some of the estimates? Because a budget is unavoidable for any country and particularly ours. And this curiosity is also because of where we came from about a year ago today. How a nation was or found itself in the heat of national opposition or an uprising against the finance bill and the budget, etc., and even the actions that the president took. My brother here talked about issues to do with, for instance, financing education. Today, as we sit here, in the estimates that Mbadi is going to read today, the budget has grown from 4.0 to 4.2, 6% projected increase. In terms of revenue measures that are projected for the next financial year is about 8%. Now, looking at all these, there is matters education. There are matters to do with national security. There is lots to do with infrastructure development. You see, for instance, the president has been committing to the people and various regions whenever he has been touring that there's going to be particular roads and bridges to be constructed. All that to be made a reality, revenues have to be raised. And as we all know, no government has got its own money. Government gets money by way of raising revenues. And that's where the component of taxation comes in. And let's face it, my relative, nobody likes to be taxed, as we know, because it takes away from that which you ought to have. And so what we need is a constructive environment of discussion as a nation that, given the public participation component in Article 10, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution, that the people need to be involved. And when you look at the budget-making process and the cycle, for the first time we have seen the CS for Treasury doing or going out of his way to fully engage, even at grassroots level, with the people so that people get to understand. In fact, I speak this aware that when you look at a comparative reflection or analysis in the region, there is no country in the East African community or East and Central and even Southern Africa that has got an elaborate and participatory budget-making process like Kenya. So we are way ahead. Still, we have got various challenges. There are aspirations of the people that various projects need to be implemented, but we also need to appreciate that for those to be implemented, there is the taxation that has to happen. But for me, the critical thing is, what mechanisms have we put or are we going to desire to put in place at the national and the county level in terms of effective expenditure management systems? Because whenever revenue is raised and budget estimates are read and expenditures projected and even actuated, the issue of the utility of public funds, as is provided for in the Public Finance Management Act and attendant regulations, is very crucial. And that's why I'm talking about a constructive environment for national discourse, so that people get to appreciate what is necessary, what is urgent, and what is it that can be done at all these levels to ensure that public funds are not wasted.
Okay, actually, just want to pick up on the conversation that both of you have raised in regards to revenue raising, which has been a struggle, which has been a challenge. I mean, it's been one of those for 4 years, which has now left us having to do a lot more borrowing, name it. So the expert from ODM, as he was put, the expert who has come to rescue the economy by his own explanation, finds himself in a very tricky place where people are quite burdened by the cost of living, the taxation that's already there, the, name it. But he also has this budget that he needs to finance. So what does he, how should he navigate in terms of, people don't want to hear new taxes, for instance, because people, I mean, you saw what happened last year, and there are people who are still saying, if I look at my real income, I've actually been demoted. If you look at what my real income is, right? So how should Mbadi navigate this kind of situation in your view?
I think for me, we've already seen how far we can go in terms of additional revenue-raising measures. We've seen how the outcry by the public has led to almost collapse of the country. So additional taxes is not the way to go. And of course, economists will tell you there's that Laffer curve. There's just so much you can extract from people through taxation. So for me, I would go more towards administrative reforms. The Kenya Revenue Authority can be empowered to be able to raise more revenue without raising taxes, just tax collection efficiency. As it is now, one, you realize that we like comparing ourselves with the countries like South Africa that do almost 25% tax as a percentage of GDP. We are doing around 17 now. But for us to get there, you'd ask yourself, what have they done that we're not doing? You'll probably have to touch on the data protection, because certain pieces of information, Kenyans by nature don't like to disclose certain issues around how they operate. And therefore, there are people who are riding on the shoulders of the rest. Two, there is a tax expense. How much are we spending to collect taxes? VAT alone has an expenditure that is very high for it to be collected by way of refunds. Kenya within the region probably loses about, spends about over 3% of GDP in terms of just collecting the taxes, and the bigger percentage is on VAT. Perhaps that's why when you look at the current proposals, there is more move towards abandoning zero-rated products towards exempt, because those zero-rated products end up coming with the related tax expense in terms of VAT refunds and claims.
Yes.
So I think it's the juggling of that space, and then there is the elephant in the room. They say this budget is zero-based.
Yes, I was actually going to...
I'm not sure if it is zero-based, because it's more or less, it's just a progression of last year's budget. So what's so different? I would want to posit that the process of reforming procurement in public service, the e-procurement journey needs to be actualized. It was spoken of last year. I would be keen to hear what the CS has to say, how far this has progressed, because within the same government, you will buy a biro pen at 1,000 bob, in another entity you'll buy it at 50 shillings. So that kind of disparity ends up creating a lot of waste, which if we get out of the economy, then we have more resources to channel towards important projects. So I would look at it in terms of more of reforms. For example, we've talked about the special table. I don't know if you've heard of the VAT special table, where the businesses have been complaining that all of a sudden your company is placed on a watch list, you are not able to file your returns, and you have to go to KRA to be able to clear a few things. Of course, for good reasons, KRA would want to deal with what they call the missing trader.
Yeah.
But then in the process, genuine businesses are affected. They are not able to file their returns, and it becomes very lengthy. They have to hire lawyers, tax experts, to be able to deal with those issues. And if that was to happen, then what it means is that you are losing the business edge that you want the government to facilitate. But on the other side of the coin, this special table is not anchored in any law. So are we going to amend the Tax Procedures Act to anchor it so that the KRA then are able to execute orders that are legal, so that those processes are not abused? The good side is, from the figures we get, that for the last 2 months, the VAT collection went up by almost 35%, courtesy of this special table. So there's a good in it, but the bad in it is that it's not properly anchored. So I would expect the CS to do something about it, so that we have observance of law and some order around how taxes are collected.
So before we went crossover just to get a sense of what's happening at Parliament, but nataka utuweke shule kidogo. For the benefit, I am here to fight for wala wajui big English.
Yes.
The president promised he said, as part of the things he said would change after the protest and, the finance bill of 2024 being shut down, talked about zero-based budget. Just take us to school for the benefit of those like saying my relatives or our relatives. I'm avoiding a certain kind of relative because it's nowadays political. but for the benefit of those who may not understand this zero-based budgeting and how ideally it's envisioned to help things become better.
I think for the benefit of the common man, the way the name suggests, zero-based, basically you start from scratch. You don't start from assumptions that we normally spend this much. Every expenditure item must be justified, and it must be based on this is what we've been spending here, this is what we anticipate to spend. In more often budget cycles, you'd have people say, we normally allocate this amount. No justification, and you build upon it. That has been the practice. So when you go zero-based, then each and every expenditure item line, every voted, must be justified by the user department that this is really necessary. Through that, then you're able to cut out a lot of waste within the budget cycle. Now, to what extent that is applied is what then we may have to ask. If we look at this budget as it is, the 4.2 something, is every expenditure item able to be supported? That would be the question. Of course, you may go down to each and every line ministry and ask, how was this arrived at? But of course, the devil is in the details. So when you unpack some of those expenditure lines, you may not necessarily find that. So it's something that in the private sector is very common. But in the public sector, sometimes it's very difficult.
So so what is the difference between that and what have we been using before?
What we've been using before is more or less like you estimate. This is what we spent this year. I think the cost of living has gone up by this much, so we can reasonably put it at this level. We run with this and we justify it on that basis. When it's zero-based, you even need to look at the pricing. What is the price of this? Okay. It then guides how you place.
It's a more practical one.
It's more practical and more realistic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, and we'll be coming back to our conversation here. I just want to cross over to Parliament where we have Michelle Ngele Odhiambo. I don't know if she'll appear here behind us or... but Michelle, good morning. And thank you for being there for us. Maybe you could tell us what is happening in Parliament. Is there much activity so far and what should we expect?
Well, quite a bit of activity here at Parliament, Dan, the heart of Kenya's democracy, just a few hours from that national reading of the National Budget 2025-2026. And so we're standing right outside the Parliament. Preparations are ongoing ahead of Treasury CS John Mbadi's arrival just before 3 p.m. this afternoon when the budget will be read. We've already seen several members of Parliament making their way into Parliament ahead of that budget reading. We'll be speaking to some of them in the course of this live broadcast. But Dan, it's an important day as many Kenyans have their eye on Parliament today. A significant budget. It will be the first for Treasury CS John Mbadi, but more notably, it will be the first budget under the broad-based government. And if you remember, the broad-based government itself was a culmination of months of public frustration and growing frustration over Kenya's economy and the high cost of living. The broad-based government then saw members of the opposition, Orange Democratic Movement Party, join key government positions, including Treasury, and Treasury CS John Mbadi then taking that helm. Previously, he was a fierce critic of the Kenya Kwanza administration, criticizing, among others, their fiscal policies. And so many will be looking to see today, will the broad-based government deliver? Will John Mbadi's budget improve the cost of living? Will it create jobs for the millions of unemployed Kenyans across the country? But what will be different in this year's budget? That's the question Kenyans are asking. Now, the government is promising something called zero-based budgeting. And this is essentially, it means that every ministry now has to account for every single shilling that they would want allocated or they would want to spend for the current financial year, as opposed to what has been happening previously, where ministries and different government sectors would base their allocation based on the previous financial year's allocation. John Mbadi says zero-based budgeting, which means budgeting from scratch, from the very first shilling. We'll see more funds being left over away from the current expenditure to focus on issues that affect Kenyans more: healthcare, education, infrastructure as well. And so today, we expect the Treasury Cabinet Secretary just a few hours from now to present that 4.29 trillion shilling budget, the biggest budget in Kenya's history. And that's about a 10 to 11% increase from last year's 4 trillion shilling budget. But here's a catch, Dan. About 71% of this budget actually goes to recurrent expenditure. So that means salaries, operations, debt servicing as well. 71%. That's about 3.1 trillion shillings from the 4.2 trillion shillings. And so development spending, which drives things like infrastructure, health, social amenities, for example, is getting a paltry 18% of the budget. And that's about 805 billion shillings from the total 4.29 trillion shilling budget. And then we have debt servicing, which is likely to be one of the standing points or a core issue in this year's budget. And you'll be interested to learn that debt servicing alone is taking a whopping 1.37 trillion shillings from the entire budget. So then if you imagine a Kenyan household and, you know, when they're doing the budgeting, a third of their budget goes to paying off debt. And then the other larger chunk now goes to everyday bills, rent, food, And so it is a balancing act that Kenyans I know are interested to hear, especially with the Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi saying that they've really tried to lessen the burden on Mwananchi, even with the Finance Bill of 2025, which has proposed several tax reforms, but the CS says that there's been no increases in tax in that budget. And so on the bright side, of course, we've seen several projected allocations, including allocations to the health sector, with that budget surging now by 73% to 204 billion shillings, reflecting the government's commitment to implementing universal health coverage. But of course, remember, that comes in the backdrop of universal health coverage staff across the country protesting to, among other issues, payment on permanent and pensionable terms and promises that were made to them during the COVID-19 period when the talk on universal health coverage initially began. And so as we await that budget reading done, also one of the key issues we'll be waiting to see is the issue on pending bills. Over 500 billion shillings in pending bills there. The government waiting, Kenyans waiting for the government to address that among the many sticky issues in this year's budget. Dan, much more will come live here from Parliament. Let's take it back to you in studio.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for that. Quite the brief. You should actually be an analyst on set at this rate. Thank you for that, Michelle. We shall be crossing back to Michelle and the rest of the team at Parliament in the course of this broadcast as we keep getting the pulse of the nation in regards to this day, the budget, the economy, and while all the figures, not all the figures, but a lot of the figures that are being discussed here have been in the public domain, there still remain some concerns about the expectations of what CS Mbadi is going to be presenting before Parliament. Are we going to feel a bit more taxes, a bit more some regulations that may be a bit uncomfortable for some people? And want to hear some sounds from the ground. And so let's cross over to the county of Kisumu, where Judith Cherono Mondi is for us. Judith, good morning. What are Kisumu Dala? What are they saying this morning?
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You done. We are from Kisumu, like you rightfully said, and today being Mbadi's maiden day for reading budget, the 4.2 trillion shillings, of which 1 trillion shillings, it should be noted that it is going towards the repayment of public debt, both domestic and international loan lenders. And now being joined by one of the residents here from the Lakeside City to hear her views, whether she's interacted with the budget and appropriations, what should be read today in Parliament by Mbadi. Karibu sana, naomba ujitambulishe kwenye runinga ya NTV and then utuambie kama umeshasoma budget ama matarajio yako siku ya leo wakati CS Mbadi atakuwa ana read ile budget ya mwaka wa 2025 kuelekea next year. Utuambie kama umesoma na nini kabisa ungetaka kuona ikisoma ama ikizingatiwa kipaumbele. Tuende kazi.
Kwanza kabisa ningeshukuru wananchi wote na tunashukuru Kenya mzima as large. Kwanza, this time round it is our own who's going to read. Remember, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga chose Mbadi to go there to defend us. As we have read the budget and looking at it, actually, I'm like, kuna vipenge vingine atukubaliani nao kama kwa ground, kama wananchi. But since Mbadi, we expect you to be as an expertise, one of our own, tutete pale, saili unaenda kutetea pale. We expect you to stand still, don't be shaken, because you can see what people are crying for. You can see if we are going to pay trillion and yet we are banking on food, education is going down, things are not moving on well. Where are we heading to as a country? People, and even this budget you are putting, common mwananchi, what can she budget for? Mwananchi common kweli, akona nini? This budget seems to be for the rich. County kifinywa, education hakuna kitu. Haya, minus that, tukiangalia kabisa Mbadi, you are our own eyes there. Remember, you are representing Baba. Baba has never killed. You can see the brutality going round. Mbadi, just stand. The Baba teaches us to be firm and stand rightfully. Be on your own mind. Let God help you.
Now, speaking of which, you also mentioned that we are overburdened as taxpayers. Mbadi also promised that this year's budget will not attract any new taxes being raised in the country. So maybe you can tell us something about that.
And that's what we're expecting. Remember, Mbadi, Baba always tells us, when we promise, we deliver. ODM members, when we promise, we deliver.
Thank you very much.
So therefore, Mbadi, we are here to see you. The whole country is watching, because actually common Wananchi is the one who's suffering, not the rich. And as for now, what are we supposed to celebrate while others are even dying? Especially that case. Mbadi, think about it. You're not supposed to hear crying.
Thank you very much. Naomba pia ukuje ujitambulishe kwa runinga NTV, kisha utuambie matarajio yako. Siku ya leo Mbadi akienda kusoma ile budget, unataka angazie nini?
Yes, kwa majina mimi naitwa John Owino Biero. Mimi kwa maoni yangu kwa kama Mkenya, mimi kuhusu hiyo budget, mimi kama Mkenya naona nimenyanyaswa. Kwa sababu utapata kwenye mashule pesa imepunguzwa, kwenye hospitali pesa imepunguzwa. Ukipata wamama wamenyang'anywa haki yao ya kuzaa, unapata Mbadi ameweka ushuru ya juu ya kuenda kulipa pesa IT, kulipa ushuru ya IT na kulipa ushuru ya Somalia. Sasa sisi hatujui, sisi ni Amerika wa kusaidia watu, na Amerika pia walishawacha kusaidia watu. Sasa sisi kama Wakenya tuwezi kuwa tunalipia nchi zingine ushuru sababu ya security yao, na sisi nchi yetu sisi tunakufa. Sisi tunataka kuambia president, wewe president ulienda kulinda wananchi, au kuenda kupiga biashara na nchi zingine. Ulileta majambazi wengine hapa wenye wanatoka Sudan, sasa hivi unashughulikia nchi zingine.
Naomba tustick kwa masuala ya budget leo.
Sasa kuhusu hiyo masuala ya budget, hizo ndio budget. Sababu pesa yetu ndio inatumika huko. Tunaongelea kuhusu budget yetu. President akienda huko Sudan, anaenda na pesa yetu. So tunaongelea kuhusu pesa yetu kama Wakenya. So tunaongelea hao watu wa kutoka Sudan, ati hiyo si budget. Hiyo ni budget. Sasa sisi kama Wakenya tunataka tujue pesa yetu huwa inaenda wapi. Juu budget sasa hii ni 4 trillion. Hiyo 4 trillion ilikuwa chini ya hiyo last year. Sasa this year iko juu. Sisi tunaona tu Kenya watu wakiuawa, pesa inatumika, magari zinaweka fuel wakienda kuchukua watu huko. Sasa tujui sisi budget yetu ni ya kutumika tu kuua watu, ama budget yetu ni ya kusaidia watoto wetu wa Kenya. Juu watoto wetu wataumia, juu sisi hatuoni faida sahi hata kwa hospitali. Wanatuambia tulipe SHA. SHA hata NHIF ilikuanga 500. SHA sahi ni 650. President anatupeleka wapi? Amekuja kutuua ama nini?
Asante sana. Now, my last person here, Dan, if we can just give him like 30 minutes or 30 seconds rather, to tell us what he expects from today's budget.
Kwa majina mimi ni Josephat Oduor, mimi mkaji wa Kisumu, ama region of Nyanza. Hii mambo ya budget ilianza kusomwa since independence. Sisi kama raia wa kawaida hatujui hizo budget ni nini. Budget ni ya wadozi. Kama mama ambayo naenda kuzaa hospitali, analinda mama, watu wote hawawezi kugharamia kulipa SHA. We are not employees. Sisi kama watu wa bodaboda, kuna mama mboga. So ningependa kumwambia First Lady Mama Rachel Ruto, watoto wako anakufa. Angalia watoto ambao wamezaliwa mpaka 5 years. Wacha kulala. Mama Rachel, toka campaign Beyond Zero.
Thank you very much. And Dan, what also Kenyans will be looking at is that the fact that Mbadi promised that there will be no new taxes, and also he said that the pensioners will not be having their the pension or retirement package will not be taxed. So I think that is one thing that Kenyans will really be keen in following. However, there's also one thing that has raised eyebrows, Dan, if you can remember. Mbadi said that KRA is said to be given authority to access personal and business data. He says that that will be used in helping KRA to curb those people who are avoiding to pay taxes. But some eyebrows were raised by some of the stakeholders who went to Parliament and say that this will be taken advantage of by the executive and is likely to be misused. Though Mbadi said that will not happen, I'm sure Kenyans will be keen to see what will unfold from today's budget. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you very much, Judith. And gentlemen, you've had some very interesting conversations around, there's a sense of lack of confidence in the administration. So even when you're saying there's a budget, which is meant to be telling us how we are going to plan to make your lives get better, there's a guy saying budget ni awadosi. Because ultimately, when you send some of the guys from Kisumu, they're saying, if all these big things you're saying up there don't improve my life down here, it's a waste of time. It's not for me. What do you have to say to that?
That is a very critical sentiment from Mwananchi, who is directly impacted by this budget, national budget, county budgets, who is impacted by these revenue-raising measures. One of the guys in Kisumu has indicated that, and you see for him, 150 shillings is a whole huge difference.
Yes, from the 500 to 650.
To 650.
Yes.
There's a huge difference. You see, from what he's speaking, what is very critical, as I interpret it, is that ordinary citizens and even middle-class people are concerned about the prevalent institutional cultures in expenditure of public finances. How can this be streamlined? Such that, like my brother here talked about the issue of managing public procurement systems. If we make it e-procurement, how does a Mwananchi in Game, in Seme, in Nambale appreciate that e-procurement in public institutions is going to be effected and help me as an ordinary person in this manner? Secondly, look at how some persons or entities have left themselves out of this critical discourse on budgeting in the country. Now, when you look at the public finance management framework, the legal framework in this country, it creates some critical institutions that are very core. One, for instance, is the Commission on Revenue Allocation, the National Treasury. We have got the Office of the Control of Budget, the Office of the Auditor General, and then we've got the Parliament or the legislature that provides overall oversight on public finances and governance frameworks in the country, or approaches. But look at, for example, county governments. Right now, there is the arbitrated process that is to take place. This push and pull between Senate and National Assembly about the equitable shareable revenue to county governments. Senate having desired that 450 billion shillings to be taken to county governments.
Counties.
But National Assembly wants 405 billion. But for this 450 billion or 405 billion to be allocated to county governments, revenues have to be raised and raised properly. But the beneficiaries, part of the beneficiaries of this close to 20% of national revenue, county governments, we have not had even governors discussing issues to do with the budget in a manner that they are arguing about the revenue-raising measures and how this is consequential to shareable revenue. Secondly, thinking like the gentleman from Kisumu, let me ask you, my brother, when citizens see governors using choppers every week, choppers, yet facilities of health within counties, remember health is a fully devolved function.
Yes, on paper.
Yes, lack medicine. And the medical professionals or health workers are not properly remunerated. We have seen the issues of nurses, etc., and strikes being announced. Look, these things speak to the institutional culture on expenditures. County governments expend lots or colossal amounts of money on recurrent expenditure and development. When you analyze budgets across the 47 counties, so we need to reflect much more on the expenditure culture within our governance institutions. Now, yes, I know governors, cabinet secretaries need to get to places of work quite efficiently and secure. But let me tell you, when governors, for example, in far-fetched areas are using choppers, honestly, how much money is that? And remember that when you look at the county budgets, you will not see these itemized issues expressly in the public participation processes within county governments. The other thing is this, that in what ways, remember that we have been talking about shoestring expenditure budgeting, and we reducing monies that are allocated to some things that the ordinary mwananchi will not consider as helpful. You remember the teas in the offices, the bouquets of flowers, and all this. What ordinary mwananchi wants, for instance, if you are going to reduce their disposable income from their pay slips, what kind of roads are they going to use to their homes or to workplaces? Today, many people are reducing the expenditure or even cutting off holidays annually. Some families have been going for holidays 2 or 3 times. Right now, some go once a year, some don't even go on holiday at all. The disposable income and expenditure per month in families has gone down. When you look at, yes, public servants, when you look at the private sector, what people are talking about, and that gentleman from Kisumu has been referring to, is that what is the impact of all this? They want to see roads. They want to see health facilities. Now, look at what we've done as a country for the past couple of years. When you look at health sector, in terms of cancer treatment and management, in the region, Kenya is way better than any other country in the East African community. But still we've got some challenges. What we need, and as my brother was talking a little bit earlier, if we reduce, for example, the issue of corruption, if we enhance revenue-raising measures or collection of revenue at a reduced cost, all these things will have a positive or domino effect on the lives of the common citizen.
And sorry, I just want to interrupt you for a bit. And when we talk about the common citizen, Frida Mwaka is at Jivanji Gardens here in Nairobi, and she's got some of the guys from Bunge la Wananchi. Frida, good to see you. Ukiwa na wabunge wako wa Bunge la Wananchi, wanasema vipi?
Asante sana Dan Mwangi ukiwa studioni pale, lakini nikujuze kwamba hili si bunge la wananchi bali ni bunge la wazalendo. Na hii leo kikweli tu, kabla sijazungumza na wazalendo wenzangu, nikukujuza kwamba Dan, kwa kikawaida kwa siku za zama ungepata kwamba siku kama ya leo, siku ambao sisi katika makadirio yetu tunasema kwamba ni siku ambao Wakenya wanaitarajia kwa hamu na gamu, lakini ile picha ambayo mimi nimeipata hapa ni picha tofauti kabisa, kwa sababu kutoka majira ya saa 2 hadi kufikia sasa kama saa 4 hivi na dakika 50 ni kama taswira ambayo tumeipata hapa katika bustani ya Jivanji ni taswira ya kusikitisha. Dan, ni kukujuza kwamba Wakenya wengi ambao tumekutana nao hapa ni vijana ambao wamelala tu. Wengi ukiwazungumzia wanasema mimi usinisumbue, niache tu nipige kilalo changu kwa sababu sina mengi ambayo nataka kuzungumza. Na labda pia mpiga picha wangu anaweza kukuonyesha uone taswira kamili ya hawa vijana ambao wengi wanasema bado hawana ajira, wengi wanasema kwamba bado hawana matumaini. Kwa hivyo wanaona kwamba cha msingi zaidi ni kujitosa hapa na kulala na kufikiria. Hata wengi ukizungumza nao wanasema pia sisi tumekumbwa na msongo wa mawazo kutokana na gharama ya maisha. Ndio taswira kamili ambayo hivi sasa unaiona kutokana na zile picha ambazo zinapeperushwa moja kwa moja na mpiga picha Shadrack akuonyesha ile hali ambayo nimekumbana nao hapa. Lakini kwa sasa Dan, niruhusu tu pamoja na mtazamaji wa NTV nizungumze na hawa wazalendo ambao wamejitoa tu mhanga na kufika hapa katika bustani ya Jivanji kuzungumzia swala zima la bajeti ya mwaka 2025 mwaka 2026, ambapo waziri wa hazina ya kitaifa John Mbadi anatarajiwa kuwasilisha bajeti hiyo mwendo wa adhuhuri na kuzungumzia mengi tu kuhusiana na mapendekezo na hata makadirio. Na nikujuze tu mtazamaji kwamba hii ni bajeti ambayo imeweka kipaumbele masuala kadha wa kadha, tukiangazia swala la biashara ndogo, swala la nyumba za bei nafuu, swala la elimu, swala la afya na swala zima pia vile vile la ugatuzi, ambapo tumesikia mara kwa mara magavana wakipiga kelele na wakilia, wanasema jamani, katika kaunti hatuna hela, na tukikosa hela katika kaunti basi inakuwa ni vigumu sana kutekeleza masuala kadha wa kadha katika ile kaunti. Na kwa sasa pia niruhusu nizungumze na mwenyekiti wa bunge hili la wazalendo Bwana Charles Okumu. Charles amenijuza kwamba Frida, ndio ni siku ya bajeti, lakini sisi kama wazalendo tunajihisi kwamba hii bajeti haitupatii sisi nafsi, lakini inawaridhisha wengine. Bwana Charles, kwa nini ukayatoa yale maneno?
Kwanza kwa majina ndio Charles Okumu. Alafu pia ningependa kujulisha kwamba hapa hivi tuko na bunge la wazalendo na bunge la mwananchi. Tuko sote.
Wananchi wamefika pia.
Wako ndani. Sasa iwe kwa hapa tuko pamoja. Tujadiliane masuala ya nchi sasa. Tukirudi kwa gumzo letu, tumeona kwamba viongozi wetu hawajaweka upeumbele masuala ya mwananchi wa kawaida. Wameweka budget ni kama masuala yao kibinafsi, na zile vipengee ambazo tungependa kama sisi wazalendo na wananchi waone ni kwamba fedha ziwekwe kwa masuala ya ukulimo na masuala ya afya na masuala ya masomo, ndio taifa ijengeke. Lakini unaona hawa mandugu zetu masuala mingi wameweka zao, wametenga pesa kivyao. Hata ile bajeti, vile maono zetu zile kwa tunajaribu kuweka pale mbele tuone kama tunaweza peleka nchi mbele, hao wanataka za mapato zao za kujilipa hao wenyewe, sisi masuala haya ambayo tunafanya. Kwa ufupi, hebu jiulize, kwa nini wale ambao wamekuwa wakifanya biashara na serikali, wale ambao walikuwa labda wanafanya kama zile supplies, wanachukua kwamba unapata vitu zao hawajalipwa kuanzia mwaka 2000.
Wewe ni mmoja wao?
Sisemi mimi ni mmoja wao ama si mmoja wao, lakini kitu nasema kulingana na kazi yetu zile, sisi kama wabunge wazalendo tunakutana na hao ambao wamefanya hizo makandarasi za serikali na hawajalipwa kuanzia 2021 mpaka sasa hawajalipwa, na budget usomwa kila mwaka. Kwani budget ikisomwa hizo pesa waga hazijawekwa kando. Tunaona kwamba wabunge hawana deni na serikali, lakini ni watu wa kawaida wako wengi kotini wakidai masuala ya kwamba mimi nilipeleka pale kalamu sijalipwa, nilipeleka pale makaratasi sijalipwa, yani vitu mingi ambavyo amepeleka hajalipwa.
Kwa tu nikuulize swali Bwana Okumu, ukisikiza usemi wa Waziri John Mbadi, amezungumza na akasema kwamba bajeti ya mwaka huu itakuwa na utofauti sana, itakuwa ni bajeti ambayo Mkenya atajihisi kana kwamba kidogo wamemwazia. Je, unakubaliana na yale maneno ama unasema tu kama Waswahili anatupaka mafuta kwa mgongo?
Nakwambia ganga ya mganga umweka mgonjwa kwa matumaini. Na hii ndio masuala iko hapa bungeni. Hawa watu wana nia na dhamira yao hata kusaidia hawa watu. Umeona umeangazia vile watu wamelala hapa chini. Kwani hawajawahi tangu wazaliwe hakuwa na budget inasomwa. Na kama ingekuwa budget inasomwa kulingana na masuala ya wananchi, hatungekuwa na wananchi wanalala hapa. Wewe ukiona vile wamelala hata labda wako njaa. Wengine pia unaona pia kuingiliana na hii baridi labda pia wasikii vizuri. Na kusema ukweli tunadhulumu sisi wenyewe, tunadhulumu watu wetu wenyewe. Pesa tunazitoa, lakini wengine wameona pesa yetu waenda wafanye nao furaha zao ama nia zao ni kutembea nchi za nje ugaibuni na kupeleka watoto wao, wali maskini wanalala hoi hapa.
Shikilia tu hoja yako hapo kwa sababu niko hapa mpaka majira ya saa 8. Niruhusu nizungumze na mzee wangu na Dan pamoja na mtazamaji. Huyu ni mzee ambaye amenijuza kwamba ana umri wa zaidi ya miaka 80. Anasema kwamba ameona mengi, bajeti zikisomwa amekuwepo. Na hii leo amekuja hapa na faili yake. Mzee, naona umekiandika kizungu na kielewa kabisa. Hizi ni asilimia tu umezitirinya hapa. Labda mzee unijuze tu kwanza kabisa ukianza na majina yako. Umeniambia kwamba Frida wewe ni mchanga sana. Hii bajeti ikisomwa hakuna kinachonishtua mimi kama mzee, nimeona mengi. Unatarajia nini leo katika hii bajeti ya trilioni 4.23?
Trilioni 4. Mimi naitwa Andrew Bogi na nimefanya kazi kwa serikali, tukafanya kazi miaka nyingi sasa. Mimi nikiwa mzee nimefanya kazi miaka nyingi, sasa najifanyia yangu miaka nyingi, nimeona mengi. Lakini sasa hii budget, makosa kubwa ambayo mimi nimesema, kwa sababu miaka nyingi mimi huwa naenda kusairi tunafanya budget inaanza mwezi wa 9. kabla ya mwaka. Hii budget ya mwaka hii sikuiona. Hatu kuita tuwe huko ambayo inaitwa
walifanya katika mfumo wa dijitali mzee, hauko kwenye digital.
Sasa wale watoto ambao wanaonyesha hiyo budget hata waelewi hiyo ni ukora walifanya. Kwa hiyo hii ni budget hata saidia, kwa mfano hata vijana wenyewe hawasaidiki. Na kitu ambayo ningeadvise vijana, budget yao ni kwamba mtumie hiyo teknolojia yenu kununua kuku, kuuzia kuku mwenzako. Kununua mbuzi, kuuzia mwenzako mbuzi, kutumia hiyo technology. Lakini sio technology kudanganya unatengeneza budget, na hiyo budget ambayo umetengeneza wale wakubwa wanakula 80% inakwenda kwa mfuko yao. 10% itaenda kulipa deni ambayo tunayo. 10% ndio watasema ni ya raia kulipa school fees, kufanya nini. Hiyo tu, na hiyo budget haisaidii mwananchi hata kidogo.
Haya mzee, shikilia hapo, mengi zaidi tazungumza katika majira ya saa 6. Mwelekezi kwa sekunde moja, bunge la wazalendo hapa tuko na bunge la mwananchi. Sekunde moja tu azungumze mawili matatu. Tumepatiwa fursa. Karibu sana. Wewe kama mwananchi mzalendo kabisa, siku ya leo ni kipi ambacho unatarajia kukisikia haswa kutokana na makadirio ya bajeti ambapo utasema hewala najivunia kwa Mkenya?
Tunatarajia kama kwa majina, mimi naitwa Gidenji Kamotho, na kitu ambacho tunatarajia sana, tunatarajia waangazie jambo la msingi la maneno ya utengenezaji wa ajira hapa Kenya. 90% hiyo budget.
Nambo angalie kamera, tuone sura.
90% hiyo budget tunataka kuona ile 10% kubwa ikiaddress maneno ya ukosefu wa kazi na vile opportunities za ajira zinaajiriwa. Ya pili, tunatarajia a lot of money allocatio kwa makoti zetu, kwa judicial system ya pa Kenya, maana watu wengi wamelemewa kwa makoti na makesi zenye ziishi, maana majudges ni wachache, motivation kwa koti ni iko duni. Unakuja kugundua uchumi umejifunga kwa sababu koti imeshindwa kusonga mbele. Ya tatu ambayo pia tuko nafikiria ni muhimu sana ni jambo la kuhusu public participation, maana hata hii budget yenye tunasoma hakuna mtu mwenye iko na uhakika ukweli ile views zenye wananchi walipeana kwa hiyo cycle yote ya public ya finance bill formation, kama hiyo matako yenye wananchi walikuwa wanataka itawekwa pale. Lakini tungekuwa na ile sheria ya public participation ambao ni ingekuwa sheria ya msingi, tungekuwa tunajua hii ndio agenda yenye wananchi wanataka. Kwa hivyo minister ama CS ama wale technocrat wataenda kubadilisha ile majadiliano yenye wananchi wanataka. Chukua for example education system yetu hapa Kenya, imeharibika kabisa. Hakuna mtu mwenye anajua ni nini inaendelea. Wazazi, wananchi, kila mtu iko kwa giza. Serikali ni kama itaki kutoa mwelekeo, lakini sasa tunataka views zikweze na kamato kupitia kwa vile wananchi wana address hiyo maneno na mashida ambayo.
Kwa hivyo unajihisi kwamba makadirio yote ya bajeti haikupatii uwazi wewe kama Mkenya? Bado unajihisi kana kwamba pesa hizi zinapotelea katika masuala ya ufisadi?
Mengi hata ipotelei kwa ufisadi. Unakuja unagundua kuna madeni ambayo hii nchi ilichukua kuanzia 19 wakati tulipata independence. Ukisikia mkoloni alitoa pesa ya kupatia serikali ya Kenya iweze kununua mashamba kutoka kwa wakoloni wakati walikuwa narudi kwao. Sasa hiyo deni tunaambio pia tunafaa turudi. Ukienda 1978 unakuja unagundua kampuni kama Kenren iliangushwa tu deliberate ndio Kenya tusije tukawa na factory ya fertilizer. Sasa tunafikiria kampuni zetu lazima ziamshwe, mahali popote pana resources iamshwe, itengenezwe kampuni haraka, nafasi za ajira zitengenezwe.
Naam, asante sana mtazamaji wangu. Ni kiduchu tu kwa sababu kama nilivyokujuza ni kwamba nipo hapa, nitasalia mpaka majira ya saa 8 tukiingia katika zamu ya Kiswahili. Natumai kwamba wananchi watakuwa wamejitosa wengi katika bustani ya Jivanji. Tuzungumze mawili matatu, mzee wangu ameshachoka, anasema yeye anaokota virago vyake wenda zake. Lakini Dan Mwangi, umesikia tetesi kutoka kwa Wakenya, bado hawana imani na bajeti hii ya mwaka 2025, ingawaje tumesikia kwamba waziri mwenyewe amesema kwamba itakuwa ni bajeti itakaomfaa Kenya. Kumfaa Kenya ni pale ambapo unanipatia 1000 Dan, ambao natumai utanipatia baadaye. Ukinipatia ile 1000 nikiingia kununua bidhaa, je, najaza karatasi ama bado mkono wangu unasalia bila chochote? Nitafida mwaka siku zote nitaitika. Mwendo wa saa 6 inshallah nitakuwa papa hapa kukujuza mengi. Kwako studio.
Sana Frida, ukinipa 1000 sitarudisha mimi. in this our economy as it stands. But that's we are again getting a sense. The sense you get from the wananchi again on the ground is there's a question on money, like in terms of the budget, but it's somehow always going back to the leaders. you can see it's like the overriding thing is the leadership, the administration. Or they're not thinking about what matters to us, or they are putting things that only are relevant to them. Husband, what do you think this says?
I think one is that the level of awareness in the country has gone up. For the first time in a very long time, the common man largely understands the budget, and even the budget cycle. You can see that old man, that retiree, can tell you that the budget cycle starts in September, when the policy statement comes out, and of course it goes through all the processes. So there's that level of awareness, and I think we also have to thank the government of the day for rolling out the digital access to internet across every part of the country. That means that in the entire continent, we are #1 in terms of internet penetration. If 28 million Kenyans have access to internet, they will have conversations. Some will be positive, some may be negative. So it also comes with its pros and cons. But by and large, it leads to a more open society. People are able to speak more, which is what we want. So for me, it's a good space to be in so that we are able to answer questions. The leaders are also listening, that there's trust deficit in them. Largely because first we had Parliament invaded last year because most of the presentations and concerns that members raised were not taken on board. And that led to the uprising that we had, including issues such as, you remember there was that motor vehicle tax, and so many of these other things. So people are getting more aware, more concerned. The advent of TikTok, there are those short clips that people are able to share. Some may be misleading, but some are also enlightening the people. So I think there's so much level of awareness. So what then it behoves the leaders is to appreciate that the cheese has moved. Let's be more engaging, let's be more aware, let's also be more conscious of how we carry ourselves out. When Bigas mentioned the issue of leaders flying with choppers and there are no medicines in hospitals. When wananchi see that, they'll struggle to appreciate whether you're doing the right thing. There are so many reforms, for example, in the health sector. SHA had a lot of complaints, but they've largely died down. Remember, we had what they called critical care and these life diseases that are basically death knell. You're waiting to die, you want to live longer, but basically there's no cure, so you're being managed.
Yes.
Previously, people sold the land to be able to take care of their loved ones, who eventually died. In today's Kenya, there is a lot of funding, even in this budget, towards critical care. So that if you have dialysis, you have to go through dialysis twice a week, that is fully covered by SHA. So yes, we still lose people, but they don't leave their families more destitute. So these are things that we must ask ourselves. So as you look at the budget as an expert, there are also things you need to explain to people. I remember there's a leader in my village who used to say that when a woman is in labor, the person she curses most is the husband for all manner of things, but when the child comes out, she smiles that this was good. So I think there are certain things that are good, even with SHA, that you look at and say, it's perhaps good that we did it. Because somebody saying NHIF was good, like that border person, because there's an additional 150 shillings. But what the person doesn't appreciate is that NHIF was only for 10 million Kenyans.
Yes.
SHA is for 56 million Kenyans. Everybody is covered. The challenge therefore is there are levels of facilities. We have up to level 6. How is level 1 operating? Are we able to deal with our community health promoters and ensure that they are remunerated? They pick up diseases at the household level, they test, so that if you have certain life conditions you are unaware of, you are able to know. So the screening starts at that point. Then we go to the level 2. Do those dispensaries have medicine? Have we allocated enough money to ensure that those dispensaries that create challenges to our members of the public that they say these hospitals don't work are supported? Do I see 5 billion in this budget to support KEMSA towards ensuring that supply to our counties in terms of medicine is shored up? That is there. Are we able to run these health facilities in a manner that is optimal without the kind of infrastructure where you hear one county has 700 or 600 or 500 or 300 bank accounts that you wonder what they're doing with all that kind of infrastructure? So these are now the questions then we must ask leaders. If in 11 years of devolution, over 1,000 audit reports by the Auditor General, you hardly get 30 clean reports. That is a success rate of less than 2% in the entire country, both executive and county assemblies.
So we normalized it.
The worst space of accountability in the country is counties. And I keep telling the governors, and I would ask the senators, even as you ask for more resources, these people have refused to account. The Auditor General returns a bad verdict every year. Some would say, okay, the other resources, 85% is national. But when I go to national level, for state departments, the success rate is 55%. That is better. For parastatals, it's at 67%, almost 70%. Clean reports. For counties, it is 2%, less than 2%. Nobody, in fact, they celebrate getting qualified opinion when the best is unqualified. So you look at these people and ask yourself, why can't you account for public resources? If they were to do this, we'll have a good country. Imagine they want more resources. In the entire country, we collect less than 60 billion in on-source revenue. When research by Commission of Revenue Allocation says we have a capacity just through simple hygiene to collect 260 billion. This city of Nairobi collects 12 billion in a year. That is what it was doing several years back, even under the city council. I grew up in the city of Kisumu. The municipality would collect close to a billion in a year. Today, they are hardly doing a billion. 15, 16 years since devolution began. So there are certain critical conversations we must have. And therefore, I would want this challenge to go to all our leaders. As we address the fair transition of services and resources to counties, let us also give very high preeminence to accountability, because it is not fair to the Kenyan public that people then get to retire and then they're struggling. If 36% of Kenyans who retire die in 18 months. You've seen the consistent rise in how much we are allocating towards social protection. Why? Because so many people are vulnerable. You retire, you've worked for years, but you're planning to be a burden to your child because you cannot take care of yourself. And yet you did give your very best to your country. So I think we're getting to that space where people must also have intellectual discourse. There is no reason why you can complain that NSSF is high and then you want to pay little that when you're given by the time you retire cannot help you. Let's also look at our saving culture. Okay. Globally, what is happening, even in the best countries we refer to, we must have social protection, but we must also take good care of the resources we're giving. So I would expect more administrative reforms than additional tax measures. Because if you add more taxes to the already overburdened mwananchi, the sentiments continue to be negative. And I think we must claw back on some of those things for the good of the country.
And we'll pick on that just a bit with you, Javas, in just a bit. We have Yugen Nambeka, who's live in the county of Mombasa. Let's hear what Wapwani have to say about today, the expectations, and what their feelings are. We now cross over to Yugen.
Thank you, Dan. You're joining me right here at the center of Mombasa, and I'm just joined by some of the residents who probably would have their opinions about the budget that we are waiting for. So please, I would like to welcome you into this set. Please introduce yourself and tell us probably what are some of the expectations that you have as you're waiting for the 2025-2026 budget.
Thank you very much. My name is David Abiero. I'm a resident of Mombasa town. And to be very specific, my expectation of the budget is anything that the CS for Treasury in terms of policy would do that would shift the balance from our dependence on imports to exports. So as it is now, Kenyans export versus import, exports could be a quarter in terms of value, and imports are 75. So what does it mean? It means like 75% Kenyans are working for the developed world. So anything that is going to promote our export. And where does it start from? It's from power supply. Do we have steady power supply that can ensure that if an investor, for example, starts a manufacturing company, is sure he's going to produce. So we look at the power supply and we also look at the cost.
Sorry to cut you. So we're waiting for the budget, but what are your thoughts? Do you think there's anything new coming? Do you think there is hope for Kenyans?
You see the direction that I've taken in your initial question. So I'm not very optimistic that there is going to be a change for Kenyans. I'm not very optimistic. Because so long as the budget is tax-oriented, then I don't think that is going to go the direction I was talking, where we should be able to promote export. Yes.
Thank you. Please allow me talk to these young individuals here. Please introduce yourself and tell us what are your expectations as you're waiting for the 2025-2026 budget to be read.
Okay, so my name first is Emmanuel, and my expectations for the budget are very low because so many times the budget has been reviewed and there's never been a positive change that can impact us as youth. And my faith to the budget reviewing is very, very low, very, very low.
Why is this that low?
Because like every time the people budget, the MPs or the people who are reviewing the budget, they make changes that at the end of the day, they are not implemented. That's giving us a false hope. Inaumiza moyo sana. Yeah.
Please move so that I can also talk to you. Just come through. Please introduce yourself and tell me, you can face forward, what are you waiting? What are your expectations as you are waiting for the budget?
So my name is Dennis Kishoi. And as for now, we as youth, we are still waiting for the budget to be read. I'm not very sure about how they say, but according to the past budgets that have been read, it seems that the budget it has not been favoring the youths, and we hope and pray that this time that the government will also consider the youths.
What are some of the elements do you think that should be given so much weight in the coming budget?
So in the coming budget, I think probably about employment. There have been unemployment for most of the youth. We as youth, we've graduated from colleges, and there are so many unemployment.
Thank you. Dan, that is some of just the residents of Mombasa, and that is what they have as you're waiting for the 2025-2026 budget to be read later this afternoon. Back to you in studio, Dan.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, for the views from two different generations of interviewees there. And we're meant to be crossing over to Parliament, and just for a minute before we go to Parliament, Javas, I know you had something to say when we're talking about, because you gave some very good context, Maybe we could just pick that up, then we can cross over to...
Yes. So what he said is very crucial, that, and today as we're sitting here, Dan, when it comes to information penetration, public awareness, we're at a very different level.
Yes.
And that's why it is very difficult for the public to be miseducated on the issues of the budget. People read the budget before the politicians can come and speak about it, as it used to be in the past. And that's why the responsibility about looking at the progress and development measures in this country, we call upon leaders to be more responsible. The issue about some leaders telling people, for example, reject the budget and the finance bill 2025, reject on one grounds.
Yes.
We need to have even leaders who are more sober, engage in discourse. What is it that is in the budget that is to be financed by the finance bill when it becomes an act upon ascension by the president that is progressive and good, and what is it that is bad? The context that my brother gave a little earlier, look at the health sector. Today, compare 2013 child mortality in hospitals, for example, in Nairobi, and now, it has considerably gone down. And this is because of how counties, for example, when you look at Mama Lucy Hospital in Mbagathi, child mortality rates have gone down. When you look at life expectancy, the quality of life, it has gone fairly up. Of course, mental health is an issue that needs also to be given much more focus.
Yeah.
But as a matter of fact, the gentleman in Mombasa complained that this budget is tax-based, and they don't want a budget that is tax-based. This is part of the misinformation and misunderstanding that is there in the public. the people should know that every budget must be financed. Okay. There can never be a budget that is not financed. Some politicians have been saying that this budget is not from Wananchi. When you look at the issue of roads, for example, in the budget estimates that have to be presented this afternoon by Honorable Mbadi, the issue of road maintenance has been increased from 85 billion to 115 billion. That is to improve road infrastructure in the country for the benefit of common Wananchi, school children and buses that go take children to school, people that are driving to work and back, and in fact, business people. All these things are pro-Wananchi. When it comes to matters, for example, security systems, look at how security infrastructure was in the country and systems, even across police stations in 1990, in 2002, 2003, and even now. Police stations, for example, didn't have CCTVs.
CCTV to be tampered with.
Yeah, today they've been tampered with. But when you look at Justice Ogola's proposed rules, which actually should be adopted by Parliament for purposes of enhancing the rights of accused persons, we need to have CCTVs inside cells, police cells. Police cells are not jails. They are holding areas. We need to have lighting inside the police cells. They should not be dark. For example, when you look at even the decisions of the courts, when you read the decision of Justice Okwanyi sitting at Milimani in 2019, when she was talking about the issue of torture in the country and how the rights of accused persons are to be protected, police stations are not supposed to be places where people are tormented. And so, in infrastructure financing for security, the issue about
sorry,
terrorism.
let me just cut short. So I'm very sorry about that. Just briefly, I want us to cross over to Parliament, where Ibrahim Karanja is standing by. He's got one of the members of Parliament with him there, just to get a sense of how they are streaming in and what their thoughts are ahead of Mbadi's big day. Ibra, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Dan. We are still here at Parliament buildings. We've been here since morning, and members of Parliament have been streaming in and out of the precincts of Parliament, Bunge Towers, because even before the budget readings process later, they are still ongoing with other parliamentary duties, several committees still sitting. So we are seeing members of Parliament all over. And these are the people who will be approving this particular expenditure. And right now, I am joined by the Member of Parliament for Matungu constituency. This is Oscar Peter Nabulindo. And what we are speaking about is how to finance this particular budget done with a budget deficit of close to 900 billion shillings. Then government might end up even borrowing more, and some are saying basing it on the previous financial year, the financial year that we currently are in, that is 2024-2025, then what we are seeing as deficit now may end up increasing by the time we are concluding the new financial year through supplementary budgets, because that is what happened in this particular financial year. And Mheshimiwa, thank you very much. And before we went on air, we were speaking about how to finance this particular budget. Yes, it is very ambitious, 4.2 trillion shillings for the budget. We are speaking of more than 1 trillion shillings in paying interest. Yet what we are looking to raise locally is 2.7 trillion shillings. This particular financial year, we have fallen short of what our target was for this particular financial year. Do you think we are able to reconcile our ambitions as a country, our expenditure ambitions, and what we are raising?
Thank you very much, my brother, for giving me this chance to talk to Kenyans about the budget 2025-2026 financial year. First thing, it's a very ambitious budget, more than all the years we have ever had. And this is the first budget under the broad-based government. And this budget, what we have been told, we may raise up to 2.7 trillion shillings from taxes. And the rest we shall either fulfill through external borrowing or internal borrowing. But what I would like to say about this budget is that first, Kenyans are expecting to see a budget that is people-friendly. By people-friendly, I mean a budget that is not oppressing the people, especially those who have pay slips. For the whole year, since last year when we had the demonstrations, people have been complaining about the government raiding their pay slips to collect taxes. I am expecting a moderation of the same. We must give Kenyans relief on the tax issue. Kenyans are heavily taxed around the world, but that's not the biggest problem we have. The biggest problem we have, other than Kenyans being heavily taxed, Kenyans who are trying business are unable to borrow from our local banks because the government is heavily borrowing from the local banks, and that means there is little left for the people of Kenya to borrow to do their business and expand their income brackets. When Kenyans cannot access capital to do business, it means very many people are going to be laid off, very many businesses are going to close down, and the few that are existing, they are heavily taxed and they might not survive. Therefore, this is the first budget under the broad-based government. And when we were signing the broad-based agreement to work together, we as ODM with the UDA, we were in KCC, we had a 10-point agreement. One of the key points in that agreement was to reduce the cost of living for Kenyans. So I am expecting the minister, the cabinet secretary for finance and treasury, Mheshimiwa Mbadi, who was a colleague here, to come and explain to the House that we have relieved Kenyans in this manner, in this manner, in this manner. We would not want to see what happened last year, that Kenyans are so aggrieved to an extent that they now come out to start demonstrating.
Because there are other activities in Parliament, including committees that are sitting, Phil, allow me to ask this very important question, because for only because what John Barry has been saying as an expert is all the macroeconomic indicators are showing that our economy is doing well, and what is remaining is placing money in people's pockets. Now, if government then is borrowing internally, does it mean, and this is very brief if my director allows, does this mean then that the dream to put money in people's pockets may be far-fetched?
Thank you. The dream to put money in people's pocket might be very, very far-fetched, because the people in Kenya are competing with the government to borrow money from our local banks. When that happens, there is no way Kenyans are going to grow economically, because our avenue to grow has been grabbed by the government. Our avenue to grow is to borrow money from the bank, expand your business, expand your manufacturing industry, expand your business and employ more people. If you cannot get capital from our banks, that means your business will go down.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. There has been a member of parliament for Matungo, Oscar Peter Nabulindo. So Mheshimiwa, please don't go, because we will continue with this particular conversation. There's and I cut you short about the dream to put money on people's pockets, because why I'm asking that particular question is when President William Ruto brought in the experts, the ODM experts into government, it was out of the pressure that we saw from Gen Zs. And he said, that's why I'm extending this olive branch to our colleagues from ODM, help us. And Buddy has really tried to even speak to the budget, speak to the finance bill and tell the country, look, I'm not even adding any other taxes in this new finance bill that we are getting into, which will eventually finance the budget that we are getting into. What would you tell Buddy if he was watching that, look, he's been here for one time, this is the first budget, now the country expects to see different?
Thank you very much. Actually, Mbadi came in as an expert to come and alleviate the problems that had been created by the Kenya Kwanza regime.
We do apologize for that sound hitch where we had a bit of a challenge with the microphone. We're going to rectify that. But in not too long, we shall be crossing over to Parliament, where we have the Inspector General of the National Police Service, that's Douglas Kanja, his deputy, one of his deputies at least, that is Masengeli, as well as the director of the DCI, Amin Mohammed. They are appearing before the Administration and Internal Security Committee of the National Assembly, which is chaired by Gabriel Tongoyo, who is the Member of Parliament or Member of the National Assembly for Narok West constituency. And we shall be crossing over there not too long, because this is still on the matter of Alfred Ojwang's murder in police custody, with concerns around whether he was actually in the cell or not, but it was within police custody. And we shall be crossing over there to just hear what that's about, coming after a lot of revelations yesterday while before the plenary of the Senate. So just coming back to you, Javas, sorry for that. Halia television. Yeah.
It does happen.
Yes, so I think you had touched about going into financing health, etc.
Yes.
And maybe let's just briefly touch on the counties, because I know we had already touched on it. Just the counties, because we are finding the National Treasury, or even the battle between members of the National Assembly and the Senate. Senate is saying we have got a lot of demands and needs here. National Assembly is saying we don't have the money. So there are two opposing, but in an ideal case, very solid arguments. In an ideal case, please note that part. Ideal case, very solid arguments. So how will the middle ground be found? Like, what would that mean?
Well, the law provides that whenever there is a contention in the proposition by Senate and the National Assembly, there has to be a compromise ground struck by going to the for mediation.
Mediation, yes.
And that mediation should find a reasonable ground and a common understanding that in terms of the equitable shareable revenue to county governments, what is practical in terms of being sent to county governments? Because there could be that aspiration that we send, for example, Senate proposing 450 billion. Remember that the primary mandate of the 47 delegates sent from the 47 counties by the people to go to the Senate, the primary mandate is to fight for devolution. And beyond just fighting for the money that should be allocated to county governments, there is the issue about making sure that the amounts sent are utilized properly. And that's why you may recall that in 2022, the Supreme Court determined on the issue about the Senate and the National Assembly that this county assembly is the first tier institution of accountability, the second being the second tier. However, when all this money is sent, look at the capacity of the Senate in holding county governments to account, and look at the capacity of a county assembly holding the county executive to account. There are capacity issues within county assemblies, majority of the county assemblies. And when we look at the push to have these revenues sent to county governments, it must be commensurate with being held to account. We have discussed issues to do with the reports of the Auditor General, raising qualified reports of county governments. Yes, I know that when you carry out an assessment of the quality of members of county assemblies today, it has improved considerably to how it was in 2013. But still, there are challenges there. We need to have county assemblies that are not held captive by the executive or playing into the gallery. We want that when the same way senators are holding, or Public Accounts Committee are very particular about county governments, the county assemblies should be as much. Look at how we watch it played out even on television. That a county governor, for example, of Kakamega, we saw the other day of Isiolo, being unable to explain critical issues, then we expect that such a county will really render services to the people effectively. So even as we discuss budget issues, earlier I mentioned the issue to do with the expenditure management systems of public finances. People expect that county governments will properly and fully utilize finances that have been dispensed or sent by Treasury in a manner that is fulfilling to the aspirations, the desires, and the development expectations of the people. There's the other thing about the delay of sending money from National Treasury to county governments as well. So, and that's why I mentioned the issue earlier, that as we are discussing the critical components of the budget and the finance bill, county governors should not be mum, because it affects them as well.
Yeah.
If we have shortfall in terms of revenue raised, right now there's projection of increasing revenue collection by 8%. That projection, will it be actual? We have seen Kenya Revenue Authority finding a challenge in terms of meeting its targets.
Yeah.
That also has got a domino effect generally on monies that actually get to be expended on development. But by and large, a spot check, when you look at matters agriculture in the county governments, when you look at health sector in the county governments, when you look at the issue about on-source revenue, for example, that is limited in the county governments, most of the county governments today cannot even raise sufficient on-source revenue to finance even 50% of their own budget. Depends on revenue of finances that are released by the National Treasury. So we may want to start thinking about enhancing the utility of public finances at all levels, county level and national level. These discussions that have been happening in Mombasa and even in Kisumu, people are raising their eyes, properly so, to the national government. But because we have got two systems of government, national and county, two levels rather, it is important also that people push harder and hold county governments to account.
Accountability.
But what we cannot avoid, and the people need to appreciate, that reasonable measures for raising revenue are unavoidable for purposes of financing the national budget year after year. The other thing is that people expect ministries to properly expend. Look, for example, money allocated for roads infrastructure. People want to know, how is Kenha, how is Kura and Kera utilizing finances in a manner that is not wasteful? Because the wastage, and that's why the head of public service the other day was talking about the issue about e-procurement. When this e-procurement happens and is effected, I want to hope, as he said, 1st of July, it is going to take root, that all parastatals, that even county governments are going to fully embrace the e-procurement system as a manner of reducing wastage of public finances, for prudence management of public finances.
Okay, and again, we've gone, you can see something that keeps coming up is about raising these revenues. Yeah. That's one. Another that keeps coming up is about the management of the resources that are there. Because the management especially is a pain point. Yeah. Because I can give you 1,000 bob, but how you use it, whether you begin by pocketing 300 first of all, you begin before, so even your spending begins below the x-axis sometimes. Yes. How then should it be addressed? Because yes, you can talk about the numbers in the budget, but in terms of ensuring that we've got prudent resource management, I don't know whether we are short of laws.
I think...
because I don't think we hear people saying, because we have had people who have been jailed, convicted, let's say convicted for, say, it's corruption. So it means there are laws that facilitated that conviction.
I think we have the guardrails to ensure that prudent use of finances happen. But like we said, there has to be very deliberate steps and strategies before you implement certain things. I did mention the fact that the CSA is a zero-based budget. But the best way to confirm that that is there, develop a policy on how you're going to implement zero-based budget so that even the various implementing agencies know how to come up with those numbers out and how to justify. Without that framework, it becomes very difficult at the top here that you say we've done this. And I think that would raise issues. But I think away from that as well, for the public to constantly feel that they're not having money in the pocket, every other indicator, if you look at in this country, shows a positive figure. Inflation figures have gone down. Our currency has stabilized against the dollar and other major currencies. Our import cover is good. So the framework looks good. The agricultural sector is getting support. Coffee is doing very well. The agricultural sector generally is not doing very badly. We are probably very weak in the manufacturing sector. A few things need to be done, but yet we are struggling. Why? Number one, the businessman who is out there is owed close to 500-600 billion by the national government. Additionally, that person is owed 200 billion by county government. That's close to $1 trillion, the net effect, if you add other agencies that are owing common mwananchi money that should circulate in the economy. So we have to find ways to jumpstart this money flow. So the national government must be deliberate in settling pending bills, and I'm glad we are making progress around that space. I think the road sector challenge has been unlocked. That's why a bit of movement is now happening in the road sector. Stall projects are coming up. But now when you come to counties, 200 billion stuck. And they're piling up. Why? Because when you make your budget at county level, what they do is use on-source revenue as a balancing figure to meet the 30-70 rule. So that if you know you can only collect 2 billion, but your budget is 10 billion, and you're only going to get 7 billion from the national treasury, then you decide that the 1 billion deficit, you load it as a non-source revenue. And then you give people contracts on that basis, and then you have problems. That's what's been happening. Yeah. So some of the things we need to have in place.
So even as that happens, are there no ways for these people to be checked just to avoid us getting in?
There's a control of budget who should actually be authorizing these budgets, and I think the process of verifying and authorizing this budget, there should be a law that defines how you estimate on-source revenue. Even if it's based on the GDP of the country, of the county, in that particular year, you load a certain figure from the previous collection. That way you are progressive and you're able to avoid messing people. But I think the most important change we need at the county level, as far as running them, is to allow the county assemblies to be autonomous. How? Give them the financial muscle. As it is, the head of finance, quote, so to speak, from the county assembly, must go to the CEC finance and the CFO finance at the county executive to get funding. Sometimes the money comes to the county treasury, they starve the assembly. So whatever is passed in that budget for assembly, let it be wired directly. And I think the Senate has been moving in that direction, but the COG has been stalling. They don't want that to happen because they want to control the assembly. I want to tell the COG, please free the assembly to be the oversight body. You cannot have assembly that is oversighting the executive, and yet they still have to go and beg for resources to run their programs.
What was the rationale behind making it go that way, as opposed to, I mean, because from what you explained, it sounds like it's obvious that kama pesa ni ya hawa, watumiwe kwa akaunti yao.
Of course, county is one, and therefore when the executive prepares its budget, the assembly also loads whatever they have, their component. At the end of it all, it's approved as one budget for the entire county. And probably that may have been the rationale to ensure that all the resources first come to one basket, then from there, it is transitioned to the other entity. That would have been okay if there was hygiene around that space. But the reality is, if I'm the CFO at the county executive level, and I've received $1 billion, for example, and yet we have commitments in that month that are about 1.2 billion. What stops me from telling the assembly, I'm only going to give you 50 million out of what you should be able to get. I keep the rest because I'm exposed. Why am I exposed? Because I've not managed my resources well. 41 out of 47 counties are flouting the law on 35% emoluments. They pay more than 35% of their revenues on emoluments. That definitely means that certain budget lines are going to be affected. So it's a matter of then ensuring that each level of government must also do what it needs to do to ensure that we are prudent use of public resources. And I think the same would apply to the executive. Can we have a situation where gradually we stick to our target? I know the public debt as a percentage, or rather the budget deficit as a percentage to GDP was supposed to get to gradually a lower figure of about 2.7% over a 5-year period of time. We are now at about 4.7 thereabout. It needs to continuously go down. I know it was slowed down because of the challenges last financial budget, but if we get to a level of 3% or below, then you'll start to see some reprieve for the entire economy, including reducing borrowing from the domestic market, which is crowding out private sector. And at the end of it all, if you ask who is making money in this economy, they're banks. Why are they making money? All the money they're making from common mwananchi.
In fact, the CS Treasury has projected that in the year ahead, the deficit is going to go down to 4.5, but it's supposed to go even way lower.
Yes.
And as my brother is talking about the issue of county assemblies and the independence, you see, constitutions evolve over time. And this growth by evolution is usually a best practice. There are some things that we have learned over the past 15 years of the new constitution, or since 2013, that we can make improvements on, either by way of legislation. Some of them do not even require amendment of the constitution. So some of these things, the County Assemblies Forum should work closely with the Council of Governors, and the direction that the Senate has taken is very appropriate. The issue of county assemblies being held captive by the county executive itself is antithetical to the autonomy, but also the oversight mandate and expectation by the people of the county assembly.
All right, and I think when you talk about, again, the prudent use of resources, it becomes a headache when, again, going back to what you said, we see choppers, but we can't get painkillers. There's a time I went to a hospital, a county hospital, where, and that was about 3 years ago, and I'd gone to a hospital in a certain county, and the nurses there were saying, first of all, it had stopped, it was so bad that it had stopped admitting men. So men were only doing outpatient. Then they could only admit women and children. Then you're still asked to come with your blanket. They say they've run out of gloves. And I remember there's a guy who was brought in and he was even struggling to breathe. So he was put on some oxygen. And the oxygen there was running out. So they said that they needed to transfer him to KNH. But the challenge was ambulance and after. And this guy can't, if he gets off that oxygen support,
it's done.
Exactly.
Now, let me tell you, that issue is very crucial. You may remember that when we had a by-election in Matungu, the member of parliament then collapsed in his house, was taken to the health center about 2 kilometers from his home, and it lacked facilities. A member of parliament. Today, let me ask you, of all the members of parliament we have, and all the 47 governors, if a governor was to be taken to the health facility 2 kilometers from his residence or her residence, will they survive? That is the primary question. So when it comes to prudent utility of public finances, we expect that a governor, and the example you've given about yourself, should know that if anything happens to him or her, or their spouse, or their child, they are very comfortable taking their child to the local health center, or the level 3, or even the level 4 in the county, than finding a way of bringing them to a private facility in Nairobi. The issue that was asked by Senate yesterday when the security chiefs were appearing before Senate was that, was it prudent to use money and various vehicles to go to Homa Bay to collect the deceased Ojuang now deceased, from his father's home, or would it have been easier for him to be summoned to appear here for questioning? Speaks to prudent utility of finances. So when we talk about the prudent use of public finances, it is in every sector.
DCI Amin said that because they were just first dealing with an X account, when you're seeking to justify that they had to go look for him, because I was saying when someone on social media, you just are dealing with an X account at Javas, but I don't know who is the person, whether you're the actual person behind it. It was part of trying to justify the trip, but you do speak to a good point about what is wasteful and even seen to be wasteful.
I would give you an example of what prudence would look like. 2 people earning the same salary in one office. After 3 days, one is asking for money. I can't afford bus fare. Because they got his money and they went on other things. did not even pay debt, did not even realize that I had some debt I needed to pay. So it's about how you allocate resources.
So which of those
or
two
went
people
into
is Kenya?
shopping, or went shopping for luxury and left a crucial item here. That is why we have a leadership problem in most of our counties. If you want to run the county effectively, first of all, do you have the requisite qualifications to run that county effectively? Are you trained in leadership? Have you been able to exercise that leadership role? Do you know how X and Y match in an institution? If you have that, then you can understand why you cannot afford to push any other budget, because it starts from budgeting. If you budget improperly, you are likely to run into headwinds. You will struggle to pay the people who supply you that oxygen tank because they are owed money, they cannot bring more. They cannot work with 3 months. Today, when the exchequer delays for counties, there are those who can't pay salaries, there are those who pay. Why are others paying and others not paying? It's cash flow management. If, as a county, you are collecting an equivalent of 3 months supply to run the county for a year, a third of a year, it means if salaries delay if exchequer delays for a month or two, you should be running. But for you to be stuck the moment exchequer delays, you are crying there, it means you have failed to manage your resources appropriately. Or either the resources are coming and they're going to wrong pockets. So it's all about governance, and of course it falls down to leadership and having the right people in the right places. Sometimes across most of these institutions, competence is not a consideration for certain positions. And you know, it is a key thing.
It also speaks to the funding of the institutions, for instance, that are meant to keep the executive in check, be it the EACC, the investigative agencies also, because once these things that you are talking about happen, then when action is meant to be taken, there are times you find we do not have enough capacity to do ABCD, and it's a place we see, the budgeting is a place we see the executive sort of flexing, right? And before we get into that, I do know that this budgeting conversation is not just about within the bounds of Kenya. There's also the Kenyans who are in the diaspora. So we have some sound bites from Washington State in the United States of America. Listen to what they have to say about today's events and the economy at large.
My name is Bishop Joe Bright Baraka. I'm actually in Washington State. And we are looking forward in Kenya. Today is going to be the day the budget will be read. As a bishop, I'm expecting some of the cost of life will be lowered because the cost of life has gone so high, and that's why there are so many demonstrations in Kenya. We've been praying. We are still in contact with the Kenyan people. We're still in America, but our heart, our life is still in Kenya. And that's why we are calling upon the reading of the budget today and the people who are in charge of the same to make sure that let them bring the cost of life down. Because if they don't do that, the cry will still be on the top. And we are here, and we are seeing all what is happening in Kenya. So I'm expecting the cost of housing, the fuel, and also the cost of food to be a little bit lowered, because we need to have and to hear our people. They are living in a happy country where they will live a peaceful life.
My name is Agnes Ndenya Kimulu. I am based in USA. And in this year's budget, I would like the government to prioritize on healthcare. Healthcare is very crucial for the well-being of the citizens of Kenya, and especially the government needs to streamline operations at the government run insurance, the SHAR. Also, the government should prioritize on public institutions, on the education, by equipping and making sure there is proper infrastructure in our public institutions so that they can make sure every Kenyan child, whether in the village or in the city, they get the right education, they get the right foundation so that they can be able to compete not just locally but internationally.
You know, most of us, we stand and actually support our people back in Kenya, and as we continue to support them, we send money, we still do other projects there, and we can tell that the cost of life in Kenya has gone so high.
So let there be a fair taxation, let there be fair accountability, and the funds that the diaspora people are remitting back in Kenya and the taxes that they incur, we would like to see those monies getting into the right and the major important areas like the ones that I have mentioned: healthcare, education, and security department.
All right, those are two Kenyans who are in Washington State in the United States of America, and US was saying is our number one in terms of remittances from the diaspora. And again, you can hear the same thing echoing about management of resources and also just being considered. There's a thing about being in touch with the ground. Don't put too much taxes. People are already burdened, etc. And what we were saying before we went to the sound bites from the US, the National Treasury or the executive is accused of, speaking of National Treasury, we have shots live from the National Treasury on your screen there, right outside the office of the Cabinet Secretary, that is John Mbadi. So we're monitoring that. We'll see whether our team is going to be able to get in and possibly get a quick interview from him or from the PS or otherwise, just to get a sense of what the pressure is like in there ahead of the big day before they put the flower on their lapel. Some of them already have them, so it's quite the ceremonial thing again. So we are monitoring the National Treasury as well. But Treasury and the executive at large is accused at times of using this budgeting situation to deal with either institutions or otherwise that are not towing the line. So you find some agencies will say we are really underfunded. Yet, like you're saying, we'll see some parts of government are having some flamboyant life or some flamboyant kind of spending, etc. What would you say to that, Javas?
Well, you see, there are some socio-political norms to the budgeting process. And over time, for example, when you look back in retrospect, during the Moi regime, you would see that opposition areas would hardly get financing of development projects. Then come look at the Kibaki and Uhuru Kenyatta regime, and now President William Ruto's regime. You realize that now, under the new constitution, of course, you don't have an opposition in terms of the law as framed. But it has been for some time in our history, and this is a historical perspective, that those close to the reservoir, close to power, those who are able to access information about even the resources, some that have come in, the development partnerships, etc., are likely to benefit from through the budgeting process. You may recall a discussion on the floor of the Senate just recently when the immediate former chair of the budget committee was being accused of allocating billions of shillings for infrastructure development in Kiharu. That tells you that there is the critical political question in the budgeting. However, as a matter of fact, the Constitution has placed upon Parliament the key responsibility of our budgetary allocation. Yes, the budget itself and its proposals emanate from the executive, but Parliament has got the duty to ensure that all organs of government are sufficiently financed. It is disturbing, for instance, when Parliament elects to choke or constrict the financial allocation to constitutional commissions. You asked about, for example, key organs, EACC or Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. For example, when you look at a number of many other commissions, they depend so much on donor financing for their budget than from National Treasury. We expect Parliament to ensure that, and that's why when this delegated sovereign power has been handed over to Parliament by the people, that Parliament should also be very prudent, ensure that functionality of key constitutional organs. Second, that there is reasonableness in the allocation of these finances, so that every part of the country, remember, my brother, that whether you are supportive of the government or not, you pay taxes.
Yes.
A business person who likes a government or not still pays taxes. So they have got a right to development and infrastructure everywhere in the country.
Okay.
So it's very important that Parliament grows a backbone and ensures that there is no political preferential treatment in terms of all these allocations.
Okay. So, gentlemen, unfortunately, we have to close it there because I can see we already have the IG of police, that is Douglas Kanja, Gilbert Masengeli,